Hi, I'm Dave Gardy for CyberSecurity TV from our studios here near Washington, D.C. for this special presentation in the Compliance Automation Series with SteelCloud. Joining me here in the studio right now is Brian Hajost, who is the COO of SteelCloud, and Dan Turissini, who's MTS Maritime Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Committee Chair. Dan, thanks for joining us. And
thank you,
Brian. Brian, let's start with you. The maritime industry is a haphazard set of some standards are out there for cybersecurity, but really is beginning, like every other industry that's gone through this, to adopt a cybersecurity standard structure, regiment. And the groups like the Coast Guard and the International Maritime Organization are beginning to establish those standards, but there's no mandate out there. So from the comparison to other industries that went through this, there is, even though there's not a mandate, you suggest that you've learned from the other industries that they should be complying with some set of standards, and what would those be?
Well, yes, maritime is very different than some other industries, but it also is very much the same. So most commercial organizations outside of government don't have mandates for cybersecurity outside of things like PCI and HIPPA and things of that nature that incorporate some of the controls. So if you look at corporate America and the standards that they look to, NIST 853, it's a set of standards for risk assessment and setting controls. So there are absolute standards for doing cyber work with or without a mandate. We're finding more industries, especially the industries involved in critical infrastructure, transportation, communications, energy,
pipeline,
certainly shipping. These are critical infrastructures, and hackers taking those down will have a tremendous impact on the economy. So those industries are starting on their own volition to start adopting some of the best practices that exist. And again, 853 is a great place to start. From a system level control, either adopting CIS, which is primarily the system level controls that non-federal government organizations adhere to, or the STIGs are great standards to start hardening your infrastructures today.
Okay. Now, Dan, from a federal government perspective in the maritime space, like the Military Sealift Command, what would be the compliance standards there that would have to be employed?
Well, of course, the Navy's going to require, and Transcom's going to require the NIST 53 series compliance requirements inside the proper Navy, civilian and military. And then with the Military Sealift Command, we have a lot of, we call them contractors, that run the ships for the Military Sealift Command and work with Transcom. They run some of the ports. They run a lot of the infrastructure. And remember, maritime is really a system of industries. It's not just the boats floating in the water. So you got the ports. You have the coordination with the truckers and the train systems. Intermodal, et cetera. And then particularly with the United States maritime industry, we're such a small piece of the worldwide maritime industry. Even the companies that are American subsidiaries, if you will, operating for the Military Sealift Command and even some commercial shipping, are usually owned by international companies. So, and they're a very small part of each of those companies' fleets. So there's a lot of complexity there. So I think coming down the road, we talked earlier in a different forum about the 171 requirements coming down, and they will definitely touch the maritime industry, including the folks that support the Military Sealift Command as part of the supply chain for the military. And then as CMMC evolves, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model certification, that'll come into play as well. We also know that the maritime industry is has a multi-factor compliance requirements. They have the Coast Guard to deal with, they have MARAD to deal with, and they have the International Maritime Organization to deal with. All of them are looking at different aspects of how to apply cybersecurity. So if you look at a company that's, for example, either working as a leased company or working on military ships with their personnel for the maritime marine, the Sea Lift Command, you're looking at a company that has folks working in the military overall, but those people are also working in other venues, either in the port and stuff. So there's a lot of different parts that need to be coordinated. So I think all of this is going to come into play. They have to answer to IMO. IMO's coming up with some standards. Coast Guard is coming up with some standards. We've talked about getting cybersecurity as part of safety at life at sea in the past, and then whatever MARAD would bring to the table from the Department of Transportation. So unlike a lot of industries, they have a lot of gods they have to answer to. And with a lot of these government requirements, they're not all consistent all the time. Hopefully they're bringing those together. So,
for instance, you can no longer have thumb drives in the DoD-related contract, maritime contract, is that right?
Well, Navy specific doesn't allow thumb drives in their computers.
Do you see something like that coming into play for the regular maritime space without federal mandate?
You know, that would be interesting. I think they're so far behind in thinking on that. Personally, I don't think banning thumb drives is the answer. I think having authenticated thumb drives with encryption capability so that you aren't carrying around nefarious software is the right answer. I think, you know, you lose functionality by putting epoxy in that thumb drive reader, that USB reader, when there are other more elegant ways to protect the data and the connection and authenticating that connection. But it's possible. I think, you know, an industry like the maritime industry may say, okay, well, the Navy's doing this and we're doing this on our MSC ships. Maybe we should follow the same rule set.
Excellent. Now, when that comes into play, Brian, and more compliance standards are set, where does compliance automation come in based on your other industry experience that you could recommend to the maritime side?
Well, if you look at the system level controls, the actual hardening of operating systems and applications, you know, that's an area that can be done manually, and it's excruciatingly expensive. Or you can have technology where you get lower cost, consistency, and speed. So one of the things that has slowed mandates down is the fact that you can't bankrupt someone by making them be secure. So the advent of technologies that allow them to do the job at a cost in which they can afford will help both in the security side, but also in the organizations being able to mandate the security.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate the points as it relates to the maritime industry. I did not mention that Dan is a graduate of the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, so he's got both the cybersecurity side and the maritime side in his background, and we appreciate you coming out here today.
And I'd like to add a point to that. The automation also does a lot for you from taking the heavy lifting out of human hands. And, you know, everybody agrees that the human factor is probably the biggest risk in our cybersecurity requirements. And the more you can pull away from people, and it's not all malicious, people making mistakes, and people make mistakes all the time, automating that really brings a lot to the table from a security perspective.
Okay, excellent perspective. We've been talking with Dan Turissini, who's Marine Technology Society Maritime Cybersecurity Infrastructure Committee Chairman, and Brian Hajost, who's COO for SteelCloud. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. I'm Dave Gardy for CyberSecurity TV from our studios here near Washington, D.C. as part of the Cybersecurity Compliance Automation Series sponsored by SteelCloud.